Good morning. I'm sure this is exactly what you guys woke up to see, is a bunch of middle-aged guys in suits. I guess it's all the panels, isn't it?
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. So pleasure to be here. Thank you, VTC Media, for organizing the event. I'm just going to do the very simple thing and ask each panelist to quickly explain who they are and what their company does. Emmanuel.
Emmanuel Abiodun. I'm an architect at Oracle, driving technology, strategy, and vision for Oracle blockchain.
Finan, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Manifold Technology. We're an enterprise infrastructure platform. We work with a lot of Global 500 companies.
Dan Mandell, I'm the VP of Strategy and Sales at Baton Systems. Think of us as a blockchain-inspired, although not blockchain, middleware for payments for the institutional and capital markets.
That's great. So are you guys going to be shilling any coins? That's probably what they wanted to know. No coins? All right. So yeah, if you guys wanted to know which coins to buy, this is probably not the best panel to come to. So a real quick show of hands for those in the audience. I would like to know, real fast, what you think the line item, budget item for a quote-unquote blockchain-related project in an enterprise is. Is it less than 10%? 10% to 50%, or more than 50%? So let's raise your hand. Who thinks it's less than 10% of a budget? So that's like 8 people, okay. Who thinks it's 10 to 50%? So there's 3 brave souls, and then more than 50%. Okay, so at least those people aren't wrong. That's good. All right, so that's one of the next questions I'm going to ask each one of you guys. So Emmanuel, when you guys at Oracle are looking with your clients and I guess their counterparties, when you're building out these projects, what would you say a budget line item would be related to quote-unquote blockchain stuff?
Sure. Well, as an architect, my prime focus is on technology, strategy, and vision, driving that from an architecture perspective as well. So I do have the privilege of working with some of our largest customers, and what you do find is no use case is identical. Customers' needs vary depending on project to project, and there are 2 major items in terms of cost you have to look at. One is from infrastructure perspective, and the other is a development perspective. Now, the things affecting the development side is predominantly the fact that a lot of the tools related to blockchain development or smart contract engineering are very, I'd say, infantile by nature. So you end up having to hire people who parade themselves as blockchain engineers or blockchain experts and pay them a king's ransom to get the job done, which isn't optimal. But I think as the industry matures and the tools become more standardized, that you start to see a reduction in these costs. Additionally, from enterprise perspective, if you're thinking from an infrastructure perspective, if a lot of your work is, if a lot of the management around infrastructure, keeping it highly available, manageability, upgrades, as the technology is always moving, you're going to have a lot of technology churn. So if you're not partnering with someone who's taking care of that for you from that perspective, then your costs can be relatively high to do so. And if you also consider the fact that, what is the value of blockchain? If you're looking at a purchase of, a blockchain as a purchase item from any particular sale, it's going to vary also. If you're thinking of simply ERP, connecting ERP systems using blockchain, ERP is evidently going to be the largest part of a SKU, and blockchain a very minuscule part. But overall, you can't overweigh that small amount of cost, right, to the actual benefit you receive from interoperability from the ERP systems. So that's kind of my answer for that.
I hope you transcribed that answer. That was really good. Chris, I hope you're just as eloquent, maybe with a little posher accent, too.
Yeah, Emmanuel's a tough act to follow, obviously. He's seen a lot in this space. I will add, and just to echo his comments, I think it really depends on the enterprise and their requirements. We've seen really sophisticated buyers who have their act together, and then we've seen all the rest. And I think to answer your original question, blockchain is often a convenient moniker that can be used to help drive modernization projects. And then there are some use cases where it's actually a useful tool. But in general, it's very expensive in terms of operational process, in terms of integration, and often the cost-benefit equation doesn't really weigh in blockchain's favor. In our experience, the hardest thing to do, quite frankly, is move from that innovation prototyping stage, POC stage, with a big customer into any kind of production infrastructure. And there's a lot of reasons for that. you may be working with the innovation team, and they might not have the business side champion who's got the juice to really push this through. And then also we found where the rubber meets the road in the enterprise, using this as a way to synchronize data or transaction activity across siloed systems, those tend to be really ancient systems. So if you're trying to run any kind of synchronous or modern software across them, the system admins, the DevOps teams may not be the best. They are probably used to working on that ancient infrastructure. And so you now have an education problem of how do you up-level them, how do you get everybody comfortable with this software, and quite frankly, it's just much easier for it to say no and for it to die, and that's why we don't see a lot of transition from that innovation side across the valley of death into production. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot of focus on services and a lot of business models built on selling real complicated services to basically de-risk this for the big enterprise, rather than a focus on enterprise software.
Dan, any other thing you want to input here, or is it everybody ditto?
No, I definitely will add some stuff here, because focusing specifically on our solution as it relates to payments, we wanted to be able to solve the problems today, and so in order to do that, you actually have to integrate with the existing systems, the existing payment rails, et cetera. So we took a more, I would call it practical, pragmatic approach in order to connect up to these. And so we actually have had no blockchain interactions with the products and projects that we've been working on. We've got 3 different projects that are in production.
You have to get off the stage then. Sorry, this is a blockchain-only panel.
Yeah, I'll leave in a minute. But we also have that on-road to be able to write into those blockchains that some of these institutions are using for the data storage. So it's at least that on-ramp to get there while we're solving the problems today.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to play real audible real quick. We talked about this in the green room. Tokenization is this huge, I don't quite understand why there's so much furor over it and desire to tokenize the world. But quickly explain your guys' own position at the company. Do you guys think that everything that you guys are working on is going to be tokenized, and you guys are going to be on secondary markets and driving Lambos and stuff like that?
Well, depends what my view are, right? I think overall, what people are fundamentally looking for are atomic swaps on currency, and that's existed for a very long time. So I don't think a lot of these tokens are solving any fundamental problems. You look at the EOSs, the Ethereums, and you look at Bitcoin and all the other crypto assets that are out there. And in terms of from a token perspective, the question is always being, if you put on a product manager act, what problem are you fundamentally trying to solve? And if you're solving it from the perspective of an enterprise, it's very different from if you're solving it from someone who simply just graduated from college and has this big idea to decentralize everything. And decentralization of everything isn't inherently always a good idea.
But people on Twitter tell me it is. Are you saying that they're wrong?
Of course, yeah. I see your arguments on Twitter all the time.
I don't argue
I try not to get involved.
I'm very mum. I don't talk.
Yeah, but look, end of the day, if I store my files on some decentralized network, right, and it goes missing, I can't report to my CEO and say, well, we've got no one to sue. It's in a decentralized network. You want someone to sue. You want someone accountable. Accountability is not a bad thing. Having trustless systems, great for computation, but I think at times there are items that just require, an institution behind them that you can actually go to and have some form of backing.
Yeah, I think there's 2 schools of thought here. There's certainly room for tokenization in capital markets, right? In taking certain types of assets and just making them much more liquid where there probably should be more liquidity. So I think there are certain capital markets use cases for them. Look at, corporate real estate, right? There's a lot of cases now where we're seeing probably some really interesting tokenization use cases emerge. Insurance as well. I think securitizing assets that are very difficult today to quantify, securitize, and disintermediate some of what currently is a very expensive process. I think there's some utility to that. But on the enterprise side, I completely agree. It generally is adding complexity to a system where the goal needs to be to simplify. And what you really try to do is you take the existing consensus and governance mechanisms and you use technology to make them much more efficient, make them easier to audit, make them easier to synchronize, right, and extend. And that's where elements of this technology can be very useful. But you need to look at where people are already walking on the grass, and then you use this to pour the concrete so they can walk a lot faster or take their electric scooter. Rather than trying to say, no, here, walk over here on this sidewalk that we're going to create with this new token.
Can you imagine a world where we have a token for everything? I go to Starbucks and the Starbucks token. You know, I go to Macy's and the Macy's token. I go to Uber, I need an Uber token. I mean, I need a token for everything I do, a separate type of token for every action. That's what's really happening with the proliferation of tokens we see today. It's actually creating a more complex society than I can envisage. I think there's value, inherent value in being able to have an asset that you're bearing yourself. But we all know bearer assets aren't the solution to everything as well, right? People lose their wallets, tokens are lost. What do? Great, go and cry. No one's going to give you any money back, right?
Sorry for your loss, yeah.
Yeah, sorry for your loss, but...
Dan, what about it? Are we all adding more friction? Is that what your goal is over at Baton?
Yeah, I mean, one of our goals is to make sure that we're removing a lot of the capital inefficiencies from the market due to prepayments, as well as being able to put your assets back to work more quickly, so increasing the velocity of those assets. And by using a token or a cryptocurrency or something like that, I would argue, A, you're potentially adding more risk to the system because it's potentially an IOU. You don't really have that asset in your account, so you can actually repurpose it or respend it. Additionally, something that's incredibly important when you're talking about making $10 million payments or $100 million payments between large institutions rather than the $10 or $100 that you're trying to send overseas, you need settlement finality. And in order to fit in with settlement finality as it exists today, you can't be changing the definition of money into something else. And you still need to have that consensus that exists in the marketplace today, which says when a bank moves an asset from one account to another and they tell you that asset has moved, that's the finality. That's how settlement finality is written, and that's how you have to integrate into the system today. I think the other thing about using cryptocurrencies or tokenization, especially when you're talking about the large banks, is you need that network effect. You need everybody to say, all right, we're going to use this new settlement mechanism tomorrow or whenever it is, and I would argue that's years away. So we want to be able to solve the problems today and start making those assets more efficient today.
Gotcha. Okay, I know most of the audience probably cares about use cases because that's what this panel is supposed to be about, and not just us whining about ICOs and tokens. We could do that all day, by the way, if you guys want us to do that. So I guess the next question is you've had a whole lot of mini consortia create trade finance-related platforms in the last 6 to 12 months. WeTrade from IBM just launched. HKMA, their trade finance stuff was announced last week. Singapore just announced their own trade finance platform yesterday. What goes after trade finance in terms of production systems or production use cases? How do you see that over at Oracle?
So Oracle, as you know, we just announced a launch of our own Oracle Blockchain Cloud Service. So we're offering a service based on Hyperledger open source platform for our customers to build their own business networks. The whole point of blockchain that we see is allowing customers to build their own networks, which they operate and own themselves, which includes consortia. For example, one of the companies we're working with is TradeFin. They are building their own consortia around procure-to-pay solutions and actually integrating with the Stellar network themselves. So customers are interested in end-to-end solutions. I think if you look from Oracle's perspective, Oracle has over 10,000 different applications. And we see immense value in improving our own applications whereby they're better connected using blockchain as a means of synchronizing data across enterprise boundaries and also creating a more succinct way of sharing data across applications that may not be across the same vendor. So it's going to be interoperability, solving interoperability issues. It's going to be around, business-to-business payments is one area where we're seeing a large area of growth. And supply chain as usual, right? Supply chain being very complex and multiple intermediaries who may not necessarily trust one another seems to be a massive area that Oracle customers have high interest in. But as we know, Facebook is not important because, I can take pictures and share it with 2 people. Facebook is important because almost everybody's on Facebook. So these networks inherently have a growth issue, right? You have to be able to bootstrap them. Who's going to be a founder of a consortium? What are the governance models required to actually operate this consortia? Because if it's just a consortium that I run myself and I invite anyone who I choose and please, then it's really just another centralized system by proxy.
Like another clearinghouse, yeah.
Correct.
What's going on, Chris?
Yeah, I think trade finance is emblematic of a lot of huge friction in everything from inventory management, right, through procurement, through customer vetting, through supply chain, through finance and insurance, right? And so there are all of these adjacencies to that, and I definitely think that this technology can be a huge enabler for that space to drive down costs, to open up new financing, and just general liquidity. And a lot of it comes down to trust. I'm a security guy by background, and so anytime you can deliver more trust as an enabler, that is a great way to drive down friction as well, because those those trust guarantors are typically a huge cost center. What we try to focus on, and we've done some supply chain work, I think it's fascinating, but we really try to focus on more the retail side, right? So how can we help drive efficiency, liquidity, better synchronization, better customer and marketing sharing of data across ecosystems, from CRM systems through the back office into the client app, right? And so we look for opportunities within ecosystems to do that. I'm going to get a little ahead of my skis here and say that we're actually delivering something very soon with a large cloud provider to kind of build on, I think, this concept. And we're seeing a lot of industry consensus, I think, that these types of platforms, if you abstract away a lot of the complexity and make it much simpler to build these enterprise applications on top of it, you can begin to drive a lot more usage, but more importantly, you can really help further the integration. And then when you do that, when you get this, when you make it just much easier to deploy these into actual enterprise applications to solve a real problem, you begin to get this network effect, and it becomes very positive. And so we look for those types of ecosystems where we can do that. And what we're really focused on now is how can we embed this, at the infrastructure layer to deliver it? Because in my view, this gets back to your original question, blockchain is a feature, it's not a product. So how can you deliver that feature so that it's useful as a benefit when it's needed, when it makes sense, to flip a switch and now you've got that layer and you can connect out to the network, whether it's internal in an ecosystem or extend it out to your partners.
Did you register trust as a service as a trademark yet? Is that something you guys are?
It's probably too late now.
TAS. All right. Dan, what about
Things
you
you
guys?
should have told me in the green room later.
I, of course, echo the comments that Chris and Emmanuel were saying. But what I would add to that is not only it's the trust, it's the transparency. So knowing exactly where you are in the process. A lot of times you're not going to know whether you're getting a payment or whether you're getting delivery of goods or something like that until they actually show up in the warehouse or until the asset shows up in your account. So knowing and understanding where you are in the process so you can actually deal with problems as they crop up. So one of the things that I would say that we're going to hopefully be integrating into those type of supply chain and trade finance workflows is being able to synchronize and orchestrate the payments versus the delivery, et cetera. Just removing that layer of friction from there. So hopefully it's going to speed up the velocity of those assets and remove some of that friction from the market.
Okay, so you briefly mentioned Stellar in one of your comments here. So that's one of the prompted questions I was going to ask you about. Just the other day, IBM announced a partnership that went live, apparently. Is anyone from IBM here? You should just leave, okay? Can you just do that? We're giving the floor to Oracle here, all right? So what's your guys' take on, your view on partnerships with companies that are doing something with cryptocurrencies and ideas around stablecoins? Is that something that comes up at all with either your customers or with Oracle itself?
Well, at Oracle, I think our aim is to probably stay away from cryptocurrencies in all forms, right? Because
So that was some shade he just threw right at you, that lady right there. Yeah.
stay away from cryptocurrencies. I mean, there are multiple reasons why, as you'd know, evidently. But overall, you touch on stablecoins. Our customers predominantly are interested in end-to-end solutions. Business-to-business payments is one of the biggest issues that they're trying to solve. Being able to transact between themselves without using traditional payment rails. So in those networks, it might absolutely seem valid to create a token between themselves that they mutually utilize as some form of payment or rewards. So in those contexts, it's absolutely fine. Let the customers go and build that. But companies who are building cryptocurrencies in their own silos and trying to offer that up, I think there are challenges they have for adoption right now, apart from regulatory issues as well that are related. But I think only time will tell and see where that goes. But I think for now, Oracle is interested in end-to-end solutions. Our customers, on the other hand, are free to partner with companies and work with whatever types of platforms that are offering cryptocurrency as a service, as I call it. But from our perspective, our focus is predominantly offering solutions for our customers to solve interoperability issues.
All right. Chris, we've talked about this before on a previous panel. You've been very candid about the challenges to integrate into financial institutions. Would you like to, give everyone kind of a, not the riot act, but tell people why they should just take it down a notch or two when they're looking to put something into production and maintain it and administer it? It's not just like a quick flip and then you're done. You can walk away from the project.
Yeah. So the spirit is generally willing and the flesh is weak. Right. This is what we found. And
were we supposed to have like robes when we came on this panel?
I think there's a lot of really well-meaning people in large FIs, and frankly, pretty well educated about the strengths and weaknesses of the protocols. Some of the risks and opportunities of automating workflows through smart contracts. You do tend to get fixation on shiny objects or protocol specific fixation, and I completely agree. I think to the extent you can sort of be agnostic, and this is Manifold's approach. We want to let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? I don't know that we've seen the killer app or the killer protocol yet. And the application developers, right, the crowd is going to determine that over time. So from our perspective, we want to be relatively agnostic and build tools that are extensible across, and then really let the app developers and the enterprise business value drive us to the right technologies. But to get to your point, or your question, there are really two key things that we found working with banks that I will not name. Can
you name the banks, please, real quick?
And terrific people, well-meaning people, but as an institution, there is really two key elements that prevents innovation, but specifically this type of new technology, I think, from flourishing in production environments. The first is just bureaucracy, unfortunately. And I have a government background, so that word really just, it really sucks, but it exists. And I don't care how well-meaning you are, I don't care how much this is a priority in the C-suite. Getting the CISO, the CIO, right, the system admin who's running the pre-production ops team to study up and understand the software and figure out how to do the integrations, right, and get through all of those accreditation stages that you need to de-risk this for your enterprise. There are scores of people who are involved, and unless you've got people who are willing to expend true political capital and have that capital, they've got the juice to really drive things across the finish line, it's not going to happen. Related, and that's why we've seen, maybe a handful of successful production deployments, and most of those are blockchain light or maybe blockchain in name only.
Blockchain on a slide. There's something with the word blockchain.
Well, and that, this ends up being the approach, right? You've got these side chain, basically databases that are tokenizing or anchoring transactions to some public chain. And as a security guy, I hate that concept because now you've created two systems of record that always need to match. And if you're a global financial institution, that is not a serious approach. I'm sorry. That's not the right way to solve this problem. The second is infrastructure. So the infrastructure that we found has been absolutely ancient. The way it's managed, the way data centers communicate, their network communication protocols, and what you're talking about here is trying to use modern consensus techniques in computer science that have to be able to work very quickly to synchronize transaction activity, to synchronize data. That's ultimately what we're talking about here, right? Bringing nodes together digitally and making sure that you've got a consistent ledger, a consistent record. And banks do not do that well because their infrastructure is ancient. They don't operate that way. Everything is siloed. They don't talk to each other efficiently. They use these back offices. So the entire architecture is anathema to this approach.
Yep.
And that then compounds the bureaucratic problem and vice versa.
Yep.
And so structurally, you've got these huge barriers that need to be overcome. And I don't care how well-meaning your CEO is. I don't care how well-meaning your innovation lead may be. All of those people in between are going to be the ones that actually make a production system happen and make it successful. And I haven't seen that yet in the sector.
Did you have to sleep under a tent to do this, like Elon Musk is doing, in order to get the things turned on? Sorry, any Tesla fans. I'm not short or long on that. Dan, real quick, you guys were announced as one of the 4 vendors working with the Bank of England Phase 2. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And does that involve a central bank digital currency at this stage?
So yeah, thank you very much. We were honored to be one of 4 companies to work with the Bank of England on their new RTGS. Got to work on some proof of concept. So we actually got to choose what proof of concept we wanted to work on. So given our current offerings, so we work with one of our announced deals with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Citibank for margining. We wanted to prove the value of being able to settle margining at the central bank using central bank money because it was really able to de-risk as much as possible that whole margining process. So we were able to prove that out, not only being able to margin, but actually to be able to bilaterally or multilaterally net between institutions and actually show all the transactions that made that. And where we can take that to next is being able to settle securities versus cash at the central bank. So think government securities versus cash at the central bank, truly reducing that risk to its lowest possible common denominator.
Wow, we should translate that at some stage for the next panel. We're running almost out of time here, and so just wanted to quickly ask you guys what you see the market in terms of M&A, IPOs on the enterprise side. Now, most vendors are still fairly small, both in headcount and valuation. I think both you guys, 25, 30 people at these startups. Oracle, are you gonna start buying everybody? What's going on?
My view on this is entirely, it's what are you offering us that can't be built internally? And it's not about having the fastest ledger and the best ledger or the most secure ledger. Those problems will be solved eventually. It's having the ledger with the most amount of people on. How much adoption have you driven behind yourselves, right? So the problems that have to be solved fundamentally, I think, is mostly going to be around the smart contracts, how you deal with smart contracts, how do you offer them, how do you prove the computation has been correct, how do you deal with privacy? All those issues are what are very interesting to companies like Oracle or the IBMers.
So you're going to buy all the smart contracts out there. That's what you're going to do. Somebody lines up and knocks on your door. All right, Chris, what about you guys? How do you see the market evolving in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I see a strategic market window kind of opening now. I think there have been some really interesting comps recently. I think big announcements like Oracle's this week are driving other strategics to say, oh boy, are we behind? Should we start investing more proactively, whether it's talent grabs, right? Whether it's IP grabs to sort of prime that pump. So we're starting to see some of those fast followers look at strategic investments to that end. But I think it's again because companies are starting. Companies like Oracle, the big strategics, a few of the leaders have begun to put out their offerings, right? Their platforms, and those who haven't been proactively working on these are now thinking about, okay, how can we catch up? So we're starting to see that signal, and I think in H2 of 2018, and then certainly through 2019, and, as long as there aren't any macroeconomic shifts, I think we'll see a lot more strategic activity.
Dan, is Baton going to buy a central bank? What's your guys' plan?
We're going to continue partnering with central banks and enabling some of the tools that they don't have today, more transparency into the market, working with their settlement mechanisms to continue to be able to settle assets more efficiently. But one of the things that I would, just focusing on the next 6 months, what companies I think in this space I think the winners are going to be the people that are getting things into production rather than there's obviously been a lot of POCs that have been announced by people, but actually getting things to move real assets and solving real problems. I think that's going to be the big focus for the next 6 to 12 months.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for having us, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.